Now that I'm done with my no spoiler review, it is time to talk a review with full-on spoilers. However though, if you do expect a full coverage of the movie, that's not happening on this video. I'm going to try to cover major parts, but no matter how long I make this video, it's kind of difficult to cover it completely. So over the course of this coming week, I'm probably going to be talking about this movie over and over again, kind of talking about specific portions of that movie. But before I get started, hey guys, and welcome back to another one of my videos. This is as well your final spoiler warning, so if you haven't watched the movie, spoilers ahead. But alright though, the first thing to talk about over here is the fact that this movie was kind of split into many arcs. All of them kind of integral to one another, all of them work well with one another, but nonetheless separate arcs for separate people and for separate events. So the first hour of the movie is kind of split into 3 arcs. It's more like 65 minutes of 3 arcs. The first of which is the right now arc, how to avenge those who died, how to try to bring them back, you know, acting all emotional, making decisions in the spur of the moment, kind of emotional. Now these first 20 minutes could be further split into 2 arcs, the first of which is all about the return of Tony Stark, the emotional impact of all that happened on Tony Stark. Now 3 highlights to the Tony Stark aspect happen to be, 1, the fact that the thing that did affect him or impact him the most at the end of Infinity War is the death of Peter Parker in his own arms. The first thing that he tells Steve Rogers as soon as he gets off the Benatar is "I lost the kid." And the kid is basically Peter Parker, the dusting of Peter Parker in his own arms at the end of Infinity War. But highlight number 2 is all about the relationship that he built with Nebula on board of the Benatar. And you can think about it this way, Nebula does not know this guy, or originally does not know this guy, but she's just come so far, she's changed completely, she's become sort of extremely emotional, an extremely nice person from that evil person that we first met. And over here, it does seem that she cares, it does seem that she does give a damn about this person, Tony Stark. And Tony Stark is a person that she only met like 23 days before. So yeah, you could imagine the kind of development that has happened to this character over the course of so many movies and so many appearances. But highlight number 3, this is 1 out of 2 heroic moments for Carol Danvers in the entirety of the movie. A lot of people were complaining about Captain Marvel being the one to carry the entire thing, Captain Marvel being the one to save the day. Now I did talk about this multiple times on my videos, on Twitter. I always believed that, you know, the heroes, the real heroes of this movie, or the bigger heroes, are the ones that are going to end up sacrificing themselves before this movie is over. And we always knew that no matter who it happens to be that sacrifices themselves over the course of this movie, it's never gonna be Captain Marvel. But that's all about the return of Tony Stark. The one thing that I did love a lot about all of this is he did seem very famished. He did seem as well to have lost a lot of weight. That little detail was pretty great. It was pretty crucial as well because, yeah, that's a guy who's been deprived of food, of water, and almost of air close to the end before Captain Marvel made her appearance and saved his ass. But the second part of this first chunk of the movie is all about that plan to go get Thanos, to go get the stones, and try to reverse it all, or at the very least kind of stop him for good. Now I think that part was very important as well because we did not expect the Avengers to just sit on their asses and be like, you know, what happened has happened, let's just let it go and let's move on. So yeah, they have it all figured out. That's basically the scene that was sneak peeked before, and they go for it. They go to Thanos only to discover that the reason he's used the stones was to basically destroy the stones. Now I did like this part because when the sneak peek released, I was thinking, you know, it's not like Thanos to basically use the stones again. It's not like he's enjoying this. It's not like he loves the power. It's always seemed like this guy had an objective, the objective was fulfilled, and he didn't need the stones anymore. Now I was wrong when we watched that scene, thinking that it's kinda impossible that he used them, that he wouldn't use them unless he's basically snapping his fingers again. But at the very least, I'm glad my reasoning was solid because I didn't want Thanos to have used these stones in this manner, like for a personal gain or a personal benefit, because it would kind of speak to character and it would basically not at all fit with the Thanos that we've known over the course of Infinity War. Loved how he phrased it as well, because he did state something around the lines of, they did serve their purposes, the stones that is. Keeping them would have only served as temptation. Temptation to either use them for personal gain, or temptation to do it again for no good reason. Now there are two more highlights about this part of the movie, the first of which is Tony Stark having no trust in anyone, and especially Steve Rogers, and the second one is all about the murder of Thanos, or the killing of Thanos, at the hands of none other than Thor. I did love how after he chopped his head off, Rocket asked him, "What did you do?" And Thor went, "I went for the head." Now first of all, it's a reference to, you should have gone for the head at the end of Infinity War, and also it was kind of mildly funny. But those though were the first 20 minutes. The second chunk on this movie, the next 25 minutes, these are all about 5 years later. So the first 20 were about right now, what's going on, how we're going to deal with this. We're not going to sit on our asses and be like, okay, we're going to give up and move on. And the second chunk was about them actually having tried to move on, but weren't able to. But it was also about the return of Scott Lang. It was quite funny at moments. It was also about the fact that he did realize some stuff while he was in the quantum realm, even though for him, while it was 5 years on the outside, it was just 5 hours. Now, the words of Janet Van Dyne in the post-credit scene of Ant-Man and the Wasp did not really get referenced over here, but it was pretty obvious that his findings were kind of inspired by the warning that she did give him in advance before he got into the quantum realm close to the end. So he basically inspires the idea that we should go back in time and try to get the stones back. He tries to convince them, he tries to get them to understand and realize that it is a possibility, and at the very end they're kind of convinced. Now, once again, Tony Stark has not moved on from, the trauma that losing Peter Parker has caused him, but he's trying to act like it. He's trying to act like he doesn't care anymore. Like he's moved on, he's at peace, and he's got it all figured out now. He's got a daughter, who by the way is named Morgan, after Morgan Stark, his cousin from the comics, but she's also Morgan, the daughter that Tony Stark dreamt he had at the very beginning of Infinity War with Pepper Potts, and named after Pepper Potts' eccentric uncle. Once again, I'm not talking all the Easter eggs over here, all the references over here, and all the nods, but nonetheless, some of them are really worth mentioning, especially the ones that happen to be double references or double Easter eggs. But okay though, this part of the movie is also about the Bruce Banner arc, the arc that started on Thor, continued through Infinity War, and kind of got its conclusion on this movie, because this guy didn't get his trilogy, like the case was with Steve Rogers or Tony Stark or Thor. So that's pretty much when we all get the Professor Hulk bit, the bit that a lot of us kind of expected, and it's all about the growth of both characters, Banner and the Hulk. Now, as Banner explains it, and as I did state on so many trailer breakdowns, he didn't lose just, all those people that he loved, but he also lost the Hulk in all of this during the events of Infinity War. He does state as well that the problem seemed to be that he's always looked at the Hulk as a disease, but then when he decided to embrace it and put his head into it, he kind of got a way to make them both into one. That's basically Professor Hulk. Now, throughout this movie, he does seem to be significantly weaker than the Hulk we're used to, just like in the comics, by the way. Nonetheless, though, when you kind of think about it, it's kind of balanced. He's weaker than the Hulk, but he's also stronger than Bruce Banner, but at the same time, he's as smart as Bruce Banner. To basically sum up, he kind of got the best out of both characters. But here are a few other quick things that we kind of get out of this chunk of the movie. One, we get the Joe Russo cameo. That was really amazing, really unexpected. Two, the first arc for Tony Stark on this movie, because I believe he's got multiple arcs in this movie, kind of comes to a conclusion. He realizes that he's not moved on. He looks at that picture that he's been hiding for none other than Peter Parker and realizes, you know what, I need to research this and I need to work it out and I need to help these guys. And he tries to get Pepper Potts to deter him from doing so, but nonetheless she does encourage him, she knows him very well, and he ends up doing it anyway. 3, we get an older Cassie Lang, and I did expect that to work in a completely different way, like superhero Cassie Lang kind of way. But while that didn't happen, it's kind of promising of the future of the character within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, around the 45-minute to 50-minute mark of the movie, the third chunk of this first hour starts with Tony Stark going back to Avengers HQ, and he's basically back there to tell them, I figured it out and I'm here to help. Let's get the Avengers together. Now that was basically an assemble the Avengers moment, and part of the beauty of that moment is it kind of paid off close to the end of the movie, when Captain America basically yells, "Avengers, assemble!" Now this chunk was some of the funniest shit throughout this movie, especially with Thor. The state they find him in, the beard, the belly full of jelly. He's basically a Santa Claus without the shirt, and he's completely lost basically. But this part is also about the part that we watch at the very beginning of the movie, Clint Barton losing his family. Now for around 5 minutes, and as Natasha Romanoff does her part in trying to get the Avengers together, goes to get Clint Barton, we get to meet Ronin for those brief moments. One of the most emotional scenes during these, 15 to 20 minutes leading up to the 60 or 65 minute marker of this movie was basically all about Clint Barton, going back in time, seeing his family, but then being pulled forward in time back to the Avengers HQ before he could even say hello, before he could even lay an eye on the kids that he lost 5 years before then. Now speaking of the second and third arcs, and speaking of the arcs that follow, the next hour, complete next hour, it's all about time travel, how to resolve this. Now there are all the references to all the time travel movies that I'm going to mention on my Easter egg and references video, but more importantly right now, and this is what I loved, is how the movie handled time travel. You cannot change the past, you've got to change the future. So it is basically all about this time being your present. When you travel to the past, it is your future. Your trip to the past is in the future. And if you try to change that past, you're basically having it all crumble because this is your present. This is what leads into that future that you're going to have in the past. Now, for one thing, the entire concept of time travel kind of felt like it parallels time travel on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. They did go to the future, and they did go back to their past to fix it, but they really never fixed the past that they lived through. However, though, this one is way better, because they never went to the future. They did not know what the future holds, so it's kind of really good. It's kind of like what Doctor Strange tells Tony at the end of the movie. If I tell you what's gonna be happening next, it ain't gonna happen. It's a different take on time travel. It's uncommon to most time travel movies that we've watched so far. It's a logical way of doing things, and it also required that they return the stones to where they got them so that everything ends up happening the same way it happened in the first place. But okay, speaking of the second hour of the movie, or almost the second hour of the movie, it's also split into multiple arcs. Now, starting the moment that Tony Stark made his mind, to go back and help the Avengers, reverse everything, that was basically the moment that the resolution for the Tony Stark-Steve Rogers conflict started. And it ended up with that moment where Tony Stark asks him, "Do you trust me?" And he responded, "I do." But this is just one arc out of many arcs during that second hour. The second hour is mostly about Natasha Romanoff. Not that her scenes do, occupy the majority of the second hour, but in terms of value, her arc is the biggest arc out of all of these arcs. The second hour as well does include all the cameos from all the past movies, with the exception of one cameo that does happen at the end of the movie, which also happens during this hour, that being Peggy Carter. Now once again, talking about all the Easter eggs, including the Captain America Hail Hydra comic book Easter egg, talking about all the characters from previous movies, that's gonna be part of my references and Easter eggs video, because all of these were the beautiful surprises, the beautiful fan service that this movie kinda gave us. But to talk about one of these, it's not the most important of them, but it's the most interesting of them because it kinda links the movie world with the TV world. Now, a lot of people have basically been wanting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to be part of this movie, the characters from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that did not really happen. But then the next best thing happened, something that does connect the TV universe with the movie universe once again, which is basically Jarvis in the 70s, portrayed by the same actor who portrayed the character on none other than Agent Carter. Now that in and out of itself is a link to the TV series Agent Carter. This is the first appearance for Jarvis on the movies, and if you do remember, Agent Carter did get its backdoor pilot on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm not talking about the actual pilot, I'm talking about the backdoor pilot. So in a way, it's kind of connecting everything, even though the connection is very minor, but nonetheless, it is a connection that we can hold on to. But let us though talk the highlights of this hour of the movie. We've got 4 major arcs that are more or less split into smaller arcs. The first of these is in the 1970s, the second is in 2012, the events of the Chitauri invasion, the third is in 2013, and the fourth is in 2014. Each group of the Avengers team-up are basically after one or more of the Infinity Stones. So number 1, we've got the Hulk looking for Doctor Strange, to get the Time Gem. But as the Ancient One does state, you're 5 years too early, and the Time Gem is with me. Now, I did talk on my no spoiler review about explainers, further explainers to stuff that we did watch on Infinity War. We'll never know if Thanos could have basically taken the gem out of the hands of Doctor Strange by force or not, even though I do think it's kinda possible. But but there's a different reasoning as to why Doctor Strange handed it willingly. So it was not just about this being the only option, but it was also about the fact that the Hulk needed to know that, needed to tell the Ancient One that, because she believes that Doctor Strange is the best of them. So there's this entire conversation, you need to give it to me, we needed to do this, we needed to do that, what if you fail? And then she realizes that Stephen Strange gave it up willingly, and that's the moment that she goes, you know what, if he did that, then that was for a reason. Here's your time gem or time stone, just make sure you succeed and you return it back to this point in time. Number 2, we've got the Thanos realization arc, he realizes something is not right, that they are after the stones at this point in time, that he succeeded in the future, but he does need to stop them before they reverse whatever it is that he did, because he also realizes at that point that he basically dies in the future at the hands of Thor. Now, one of the most beautiful things about that arc is we're kind of seeing Thanos in action. It's really good. But more importantly, we're getting another arc for another Avenger, that being Nebula. We're seeing two versions of the character in contrast. The battle Nebula that only cared about pleasing Thanos, the obedient daughter, and then this new Nebula who cares more about her sister, avenging her sister, and possibly bringing back her sister. The contrast was really beautiful, and just like her scenes with Tony Stark at the beginning of the movie kind of showed us how much this character has grown over so many movies, this bit over here did the same, but in an even better fashion. Number 3, we get to continue with Thor's arc, because the final moments of the first hour was about the Thor arc, but this was also about a continuation to that arc. Going back in time to 2013 and basically meeting up with his mother, talking to the mother that he lost on the day that she dies. In the middle of all of this, we also get to see Jane Foster once again within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There is as well the moment where Thor calls upon his hammer and does get it, and basically shouts, "I'm worthy," kind of a reference to Thor 1, but also combined with the moment that Steve Rogers manages to wield the hammer is a reference to that scene on Age of Ultron, where everyone is trying to pick the hammer, everyone is failing, and he basically talks about the fact that they are all unworthy, that's why they couldn't lift the hammer. Finally, and while the Thor arc kind of ends on the second hour, there's a bit to it at the end of the movie, handing new Asgard to none other than Valkyrie, she's the new queen, and also joining in with the Guardians of the Galaxy, which kind of explains the entire thing about a possible Thor 4 movie. And I personally think there's no actual Thor 4 movie, but rather Thor on the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie. I think that's basically the explanation to all the talk and all the rumors about that Thor 4 that we're gonna get. Number 4, there is the Captain America retrieving Loki's scepter, his fight with the younger Captain America, and all the funny comments in that scene, including America's ass, that is indeed America's ass, and the other one about I can do this all day, I know you can. In the middle of all of this, there were all of those Hydra agents. There was Jasper Sitwell, there was the Hail Hydra said by Captain America, which is kind of the obvious comic book reference. Number 5, there is the 1970s arc, where they basically go back in time, trying to get everything back. There is Hank Pym, a younger version of Hank Pym, which is basically a reference to that talk that he had on the first Ant-Man movie about working with S.H.I.E.L.D. in the past. But we've also got the reunion of Tony Stark and his father, Howard Stark. That was a very touching scene close to the end. As funny as it was pretty touching as well. Finally though, during that one arc within that second hour of the movie, we've got the Captain America spotting Peggy Carter bit. Now this basically paid off at the end of the movie. Some might say it made it kind of expected that this would happen at the end of the movie, but even if it were to have made it expected, and I did expect it, the expectation itself did not reduce the impact of that scene, did not reduce the impact of seeing Cap happy at the very end of Avengers Endgame. Number 6, we've got the Vormir, Clint Barton and Natasha Romanoff arc. Now this arc was about two things, Romanoff herself and her relationship, her friendship with Clint Barton. The way she sacrificed herself at that moment was kind of completely unexpected. I would have expected that we're going to lose Clint Barton, but nonetheless, and in the bigger scheme of things, it kind of explained a lot of things. Now the moment that I realized that one of them is going to have to sacrifice themselves, I started thinking it's probably going to be Black Widow. That explains why we're getting a prequel movie for the character rather than actually getting a sequel movie like a present day movie. Now the changes to Clint Barton, from Hawkeye to Ronin and back to a semi-Hawkeye, because he's not the same person anymore, kind of tells us as well that the possibility that that new Disney Plus series about the character kind of deals with future events is kind of slim to none. I think it's going to be about past events as well. Think about it this way, and from my perspective, all of these 6 Avengers are probably retired at this moment within the movie side of things. So if they get movies, it's going to be about the past. If they get TV series, it's probably going to be about the past. But before I move on, one thing I want to say, this was one of the most emotional moments throughout the entire movie. One of 2 actually. The second one is the second major death in the movie, but the first one, and one of the biggest, happens to be this one, because we've always expected that either Tony Stark or Steve Rogers are going to die in this movie. But when it came to Natasha Romanoff, none of us kind of expected it. I mean, like I said, it was always, hey, Steve Rogers is gonna die, Tony Stark is gonna die. Some others were like, Thor is gonna die. But I've never heard anyone going, hey, Natasha Romanoff is the one to die in this movie, or one of the people to die in this movie. But it's time for our number 3, the final resolution to all the people that we've lost on Infinity War and the final battle with Thanos. So to get started, number 1, we've got everyone back to the future from the past except for 2, that being Nebula and Black Widow. Now the version of Nebula that makes her return back with the guys from the past and into the future happens to be the evil version, the younger version. Number 2, this bad past version of Nebula is basically working towards getting Thanos through, the past version of Thanos. And number 3, she does succeed. But then there is the other side to the story, the fact that the Hulk is the one to wield the Infinity Gauntlet, the fact that he's the only one powerful enough to be able to wield it, snap his fingers, and get everyone back. And that's exactly what we see. Like right away we know the results. Clint Barton gets a call from his wife Laura, and that's where we know, okay, you know what, it worked. But that brings us to number 4, because Thanos is here, the threat is not done yet, and they've got to deal with that. So Thanos levels the Avengers HQ to the ground. He now has a different plan. You guys are stubborn. This time around, I'm not going to play Mad Titan. This time around, I'm going to play God. I'm going to end life on Earth and then rebuild it the way I see fit. And that way does not include any Avengers. Now this hour is about Captain America wielding Thor's hammer, which is right out of the comics. Captain America kind of saving the day, which is actually amazing, and the fact that Carol Danvers also returns, saving the day at a certain point in time, and that's also amazing. I know a lot of people hate the idea of Carol Danvers saving the day. She did not do everything, she only did part over here. And the interesting thing about everything that has to do with Carol Danvers on this final hour is she kind of gets a beating from Thanos. I did like that so much, because it kind of proves my point. She is powerful over here, which she is in the comics, most powerful when she goes binary, which she is in the comics, but she does as well get a beating from Thanos, which is what I've been saying for a long while. She might be quite powerful, but she's not unbeatable. Now the entry of the Scarlet Witch, that was amazing. You took everything from me. That was a beautiful scene. I did love how she partially kind of annihilated Thanos, because when you think about it, it kind of complements that scene on Infinity War, when she leaves Vision behind with Shuri and she goes down and Okoye goes all like, why was she up there all this time? Now the return of everyone, that was an amazing scene, but the most perfect scene out of all of them, the most well-acted scene, the brilliant scene, and the most emotional as well, was the death of Tony Stark. He snapped, he took away Thanos and his armies, and he died. Now I did love how "I am Iron Man" were the final words that he said before he went for the finger snap. That's basically how the first Iron Man movie ended. So his life is kind of ending with the very same words that he used to reveal his identity to the public on the first Iron Man movie. Now as I mentioned, the entire thing was emotional, and not just because of the death of Tony Stark, but also because of everyone surrounding him. We've got Pepper Potts, who's now, by the way, also Rescue. So glad, by the way, that bit happened before she exits the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but nonetheless, we've got her next to him as he dies. We've got the situation reversed when it comes to him and Peter Parker on Infinity War. The first one, Peter Parker was the one who's dying, and on this one, he's the one who's going away. The moment that everyone came back, the Doctor Strange portals opened and they were all in there. The entire battle was amazing. The funeral of Tony Stark was amazing. The entire thing, everyone attending there. And of course the bit with proof that Tony Stark has a heart. That was really beautiful, being inserted over there. But that's the battle, the repercussions of the battle. There's also the returning of the stones to their time, and that's a mission for Captain America, and he does it, but he never comes back. Now of course he might not have taken the same route to come back, that being the quantum realm, but he did come back through normal aging. He's an old man now, he spent his life with Peggy Carter, and that's the second cameo for her on the movie. And he's basically here to tell us that he tried that happiness thing that Tony Stark talked to him about. He's basically here to tell us that he's bidding us all farewell and bidding the team farewell as well, while basically handing over the Captain America shield to his successor. Now we all expected the successor to be Bucky Barnes, but even though Bucky Barnes was right there and as opposed to all our expectations, Sam was the next Captain America. Now, as I mentioned before, we did expect that Bucky Barnes is actually the next Captain America, but nonetheless, Sam Wilson becoming Captain America is very true to the comics, so there's no issue over there. Now, one final thing I'm going to mention over here is that Gamora isn't back, neither is Black Widow, and definitely not Loki. So for one thing, is set up to Phase 4, we do now know that the series, the Loki Disney Plus series, is once again going to be one that is set in the past life of Loki. But when it comes to Gamora, the door is kind of open at the end of the movie because Peter Quill is kind of looking for her, trying to scan the universe for her in a manner of speaking. So there is a possibility that they kind of wanted to leave that door open. We might bring back Gamora, and if they do manage to bring back Gamora, then there's always the chance that they bring back Black Widow in the same fashion. Now, as I did mention at the beginning of this video, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this movie. The 3 hours were extremely packed. But this was meant to be a quick review of the movie, and yes, 20-something minutes with this movie, with how packed it was. That's pretty much a quick review. But that being said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments what you thought of this movie. Let me know how you rated this movie. I personally gave it a 9 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's basically on a scale of all movies of all time. But on a scale of 1 to 10 of Marvel movies and even comic book movies of all time, I would, without hesitation and without a shred of doubt, give it a 10 out of 10. Now, I'm also going to be posting my Easter eggs and references video over the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. But let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, subscribing to this channel, and enabling notifications for my future videos, community posts, and live streams. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Avengers Endgame or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into this one, and have a great day.